5 minutes before I was supposed to be discharged. And this by this time, I had spent 3 days researching MS. Had talked to the MS Society, been looking for an MS doctor, and I heard the hospitalist who had spent so much time with me talking to the neuro, and he cut her off right away, even though the MRI said lesions and that we needed to have further tests to rule out multiple sclerosis, and that there was no hard evidence of any kind whatsoever of any cardiac or stroke or anything like that going on. And the she just started talking to him outside, and he wouldn't even look at the evidence and said she's too old to have MS. She had a stroke. So he came in and did his little neuro consult on me, told me I had a stroke, and said come see me in his office the following week. And I thought by that time, well, fat chance, buddy. I don't think I'm coming to see you. And the hospitalist came in to discharge me, and by pecking order, she had to defer to the neurologist. So they left me with a diagnosis of a stroke, but she told me she didn't believe it was real. I had found, thank God, someone who turned out to be one of the most respected MS specialists in my area, and made an appointment to go see him. And we went over all my MRIs, and he did a bunch of other MRIs and other tests, and he wouldn't jump in right away. It took a while to diagnose it and say it, but he said, I really do not believe you've had a stroke. And we went over that for quite a while. And about 6 months later, he finally called it and said it was MS. And I had chosen Copaxone because needles don't really bother me, so I was more afraid of all of the organ problems that the interferons could cause, as well as exacerbating depression. I really did not want to have to deal with any exacerbation of already existing depression. So I didn't mind taking the Copaxone once every day, but I just started it, and within 2 weeks of starting it, I had a major relapse that put me into the hospital for a week. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk straight, I couldn't think clearly, string words together. It just was a mess. And I went through 5 days of IV Solu-Medrol and came out of that, and took a while to be done with that. So I've been taking Copaxone since November of 2008 now, and because of the length of time they think that I've had this, and the severity of the relapses I've been having before diagnosis and after diagnosis, I didn't expect to hear this, but I went in to see the neuro, and he suggested that I start on chemotherapy. His method of treatment is different than some others. He starts people on Cytoxan with steroids on an infusion basis before he tries Tysabri. I don't think he's that crazy about Tysabri. He uses it, but it's the next step up for him. So I did that for 6 months until I got bitten by actually 2 deer ticks, separated in time by about 2 months, and I couldn't take the chemo infusions during the time that I was being treated with the antibiotics. So I was off of it for a while and started it again, and haven't really had any worsening of the condition, except I was, during the time I was off of it and over this past winter, I had a really bad winter. My biggest problems are fatigue and cog fog. I've tried and worked on everything in the world, because at times I was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day, and I hit that wall that just says I have to go to sleep. It's hard to make friendships. It's hard to commit to doing anything when you don't know if 15 minutes before you're going to start the whole thing, your body might just shut down on you. Um, and that this past winter, those like 4 to 6 months were so terrible and isolating that depression grew to such an incredible extent. I take medication for depression, but I was praying, God, I almost don't care about anything else that's not right with me, but please stop this depression. Um, and I've met a lot of people through the internet with multiple sclerosis. This is my first time on YouTube talking about it. Um, and I've watched a friend who is in the fingolimod study. She'd been doing better with that, and watched some transformations in her when she'd started taking a different form of supplementation. And I first thought, yeah, right, snake oil. I've been there, done that. I've taken every supplement in the world. Um, and so I started doing that, and really, really felt better. And it helped me to start eating better, feeling better, better attitude, more awake, less fatigue, and uh, just being able to deal with it. But I wanted just to talk a little bit, to introduce myself, to tell you what it was like to live a life undiagnosed and completely unaware of what was wrong with me. It affected every relationship I had. It affected my career. It affected my relationship with my kids. It affected my self-perception of, what you start beating yourself up. You lazy bum. You want to sleep all the time. Um, it affected. I'm sure it was part of the deterioration of my marriage ultimately. Um, and so, in some ways, the MS diagnosis was a relief, but it's still something that I find most people don't understand. And I really enjoyed watching some of your videos so far. I started out watching Carrie's in Australia and moving along since then. And I hope to get to know some of you and share some of my experiences. It's not that they would have been able to do much in the 70s. There were no crab drugs back then, but it would have been nicer to know, at least in the late 80s and 90s, what was really going on with me. And, perhaps that was my fault for not rushing off to the ER when I couldn't swallow quite right for 3 days, or there was a band around my chest. But I had, you get very often the hysterical female diagnosis for anything. And as I said, at the time living in California, everybody and their dog has a shrink, so you get the diagnosis that it must be something mental instead of something physical. So now that I know what's wrong with me, it gives me more of a game plan, and it's not thrilling, but there's blessings to it too, and taking life not for granted, and not taking the things I used to be able to do for granted, because I was someone who never stopped. And at some point, probably about 10 years ago, I really couldn't do what I used to do, and it was it was a shocker. But to have lost the cognitive skills and the fatigue being so great as to just overtake my life has been probably about a lot far more difficult to accept than challenges with movement and other things like that. So nice to meet you all. Just a little bit about me. Bye bye.